please. And to the press and members of the public who are viewing the live stream of this. I'll now set out the housekeeping arrangements for the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the council website for at least 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could I ask everyone present to follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when I invite you to as chair. Always turn your video function on when invited to speak. If I haven't introduced you by name, please state your name before speaking. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visual and being able to see who you are. Mute your microphone when you're not to speak on an item. Please do so by using the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. The messaging bar shouldn't be used unless you're raising a point of order or providing the wording for a motion. Please remember the panel is visible to everyone and subject to public information requests. If at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand again. And remember to put your hand down. That's the bit I always forget. If at any point there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by a roll call of charter trustees present and by asking for a response of for or against or abstain. But for many votes, people to register if they are not happy to accept whatever it is that we're talking about, and to register either against or abstain in the message bar so that we know whether we've got a unanimous decision or some dissent. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. So we move on to agenda item 1, the apologies for absence. So I'll ask the Honorary Clerk to report the apologies received for this meeting. I know we've had some.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have apologies from Councillor Julie Bagwell, Councillor Steve Barron, Councillor John Beasley, Councillor Jude Butt and Councillor LJ Evans.
Thank you. On any declarations of interest you've received?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No declarations have been received today.
Thank you. Now we move on to agenda item 3. We're asked to receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of August this year and to consider any matters arising. So, are there any matters arising that anyone wishes to raise? If so, put your hand up, please.
Nobody showing.
Right, thank you. And is everybody happy to accept the minutes as a true record? Please record in the message bar if you wish to abstain or are against accepting them. Otherwise, we'll assume that you are in favour.
No messages and no hands.
Good. So we can move on to agenda item 4, which is my report on activities since the last meeting. So the first thing to report is actually, it goes back a bit further than that. You may remember that at a meeting when we were still meeting in the council chamber, I signed an application to do with the Poole coat of arms. And we have now heard that we have confirmation that the royal warrant granting the transfer of the Poole coat of arms to the trustees has been granted, meaning we can use the coat of arms in any lawful way we deem appropriate. I also want to share with you a card I was sent by the Lord Lieutenant. This is it. I don't know whether you can see it. And inside, I'll read the text. By hand, he's written, "This is a card to thank you and your team." And the printed text is, "The innovation, collaboration, courage and selflessness shown by so many of you across Dorset in the shadow of COVID-19, inspirational and uplifting. As Her Majesty the Queen's representative within our county, I'd like to thank you for the wonderful contribution you've made to Dorset and all who live here during these extraordinary and challenging times. And although that's addressed to me personally, that is not a person. I don't take that as a personal message. That's to all of us, in fact, to all of the people of Poole. At the end of my report in August, I mentioned that I'd been invited to Poole Hospital to plant a tree to remember all those affected by COVID. The tree chosen was an apple tree with fruit already on it when I planted it in September. It was chosen so that the spring blossom and the fruit would be a sign of hope and encouragement. The tree is clearly visible in the garden by the roundabout at the bottom of Churchfield Road. You can easily see it as you pass it on the road. So it'll be there for all to see. Other duties have been very limited in scope and number. I had 2 occasions to welcome new clergy into Poole. One was by Zoom when I welcomed the new deacon at the Spire during a Sunday morning service. And one was in writing to welcome the new incumbent at St Peter's in Lower Parkston. But the numbers of activities and events suddenly went up this weekend. On Saturday morning, this is the most unusual thing I've had to do to date. I had to meet in Poole Park with a pink rabbit. It was actually a member of the local Lions who was doing a sponsored cycle ride to Shaftesbury to recreate the famous Hovis advert on Gold Hill. And he was doing it in aid of breast cancer, hence the pink costume. If you've been to Camford Heath this week, you'll have seen the poppies fixed to the land. Volunteers from Arch, the Resident Association, made them all and have been sponsored by local businesses and families in memory of either specific individuals or as a tribute to all who've served and possibly died in the forces. They've raised several £100s for the British Legion through this initiative. And on Monday, I was privileged to be given a conducted tour of Arch's other activities by Councillor Sandra Moore and members of the association. They included a group who tend the gardens in Adastral Square and outside the library, doing a really good job, making it very, very nice for the local people. And the person who devised and set up a pilot trail around Camford Heath based on those who gave their names to the roads on the heath, who were almost all either fighter pilots or bomber pilots. Yesterday evening, I attended virtually the AGM of the Poole Cherbourg Twinning Association. For the last year, I've been trying to clarify the position of charter trustees in relation to twinning. I was originally told that it was a BCP function. As you can imagine, I wasn't satisfied with that, and I don't think the Twinning Association were either. So as a result, I did some Googling. I found that other charter trustees, for instance in Bath, are responsible for their twinning groups. When I raised the issue with some of the officers, they told me that they'd actually done the same research and they'd found the same information. And it turns out that they were actually misled by civil service, it seems. The actual case is that any new twinning arrangements made from now on, or rather from the setting up of BCP, will have to be under the remit, the auspices of BCP, but the existing ones stay with the towns that set them up. And from last night's meeting, I found that the Twinning Association are very keen to be linked with us and to give us an annual report on activities. So I'll be taking that forward with their chair, Councillor Mohan Iyengar. I don't know whether Mohan wants to say anything at this point or whether I'll just finish up my report.
No, that's covered everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the next big date in the calendar, of course, is Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day. Events this year are obviously going to be very much scaled back. The plans, as I understand them, are that there will be a limited wreath laying ceremony at the War Memorial in Poole Park at some point on the 8th of November. However, the suggestion is that we remember while we're on our doorsteps. So on the 11th, the intention is that I will be on my official doorstep, in other words, the steps of the Civic Centre, at 11 AM. While I can't invite you to join me in person, I do hope you'll join me in spirit on your own doorsteps. And that's the end of my report. So we move on to item 5, the budget update report. And I call on Dan Povey, who's the responsible financial officer, to present the budget update report circulated with the agenda at item number 5.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Charter Trustees. The budget report covers 3 aspects of the Charter Trustees budget. The first being the position for the last financial year for 2019-20. Charter Trustees will recall in their last meeting in August, they approved the accounting statements for last financial year, which were at quite a high summary level. And what we agreed was that I would bring the detailed budget breakdown on a line-by-line basis that goes towards that financial position. So you'll find that in Appendix A, and you'll see every budget heading that's gone to make up the total contribution to reserves of £37,658. That was against the budgeted position of 18,950. What Charter Trustees will see is there were significant savings in both the civic budgets and the civic events budget. The other area, the second area that the report covers is the current year position. So the position as at the end of September. And again, Appendix A shows you the financial position broken down into the detailed budget headings. What Charter Trustees will see from that is that there's a significant underspend in the budgets, basically due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Because there has been effectively been a lockdown, obviously there's been very little activity and very little spend in the budgets. What that does mean is that in addition to the 37,000 of reserves that were carried forward into this financial year, the current projection is that there will be just over 52,000 additional reserves if the forecast continues for the rest of the financial year as portrayed in Appendix A. Therefore, by the end of the year, the Charter Trustees will have just over £90,000 of reserves, which is approximately 72% of your annual precept. And really that leads on nicely to the third area of the budget report, which is looking forwards to next year's budget, 21-22, and recommends that the Charter Trustees nominate some members to form a budget workshop towards the end of November, early December, in preparation for when we meet in January to set the budget and preset for next year. And the types of things that we're recommending that we could put on the agenda for that would be a budget review generally about the budget headings and whether it's fit for purpose, but also aspirations on levels of council tax, a review of the recharges that are made into the Charter Trustees budget, but also what potentially Charter Trustees would like to do with that significant level of reserves that they are likely to have built up by the end of this financial year, and you know what things they want to do, whether it's to put towards one-off expenditure in line with their functions, or to do something with potentially a reduction in council tax. So I'll leave it there, Madam Mayor, and happily take any questions.
Thank you. We'll come back to that proposal in a minute. Let's see if there are any other questions first.
No hands and
No hands?
Oh, sorry. Just have one through from Councillor Diana Butler.
Yes, Councillor Butler.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to ask why amounts like accountancy, which were at 1,200, are lower for the next year. Wouldn't that be the same amount of money, or possibly more each year, irrespective of COVID?
Could I ask Mr. Povey to answer that one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the budget is the same for both years for the accountancy recharge at £500, but the charge that you're likely to get without VAT is more likely to be £1,000, because what we didn't include in there was a £500 charge from internal audit. So your accountancy recharge, both the actuals for last year and for this year, will be £1,000, comprising £500 for accountancy, £500 for internal audit. The reason why it's £100 less is because we are assuming that there will be less of a hit on VAT, because become November the 4th, the Charter Trustee will be able to reclaim VAT on its supplies and services.
Thank you.
Sorry, say again.
Tony Trent, I believe you want to speak.
Well, yeah, I'll just say that I lost all of that presentation and large part of what you said at the beginning of the meeting, because the whole thing disappeared in a massive echo, and in the end the words were multiply repeated. So I closed everything down, opened it up again, but I won't be able to vote on this because I didn't hear the full presentation. But I got into difficulty trying to open up the agenda. but yeah, so I won't be able to vote on this because I didn't hear the whole presentation, and obviously, you know, if something was said that differed from the report that I looked at a few hours back, then I wouldn't have heard it.
Okay, shame about that. Let's hope from now on you are able to take part in the debate fully. Shall we take a vote now on accepting the budget report? And then we'll move on to the third proposal, about the workshop. So could you note in the conversation bar if you wish to against the budget report? Otherwise, we'll take it that you are in agreement with it.
No comments, Madam Mayor. So we note Tony Trent's, Councillor Tony Trent's position. Yeah.
So he's effectively an abstention. Yes. So we move on to the suggestion that we set up a budget workshop. I very much endorse this, and my thought was that it would be sensible to include 5 people, sort of ex officio. That would be the mayor, the sheriff, and the sheriff-elect. Designate, whatever the correct word is. Signatories, that's Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Andrews, and then perhaps about 3 other trustees. I know a request for expressions of interest was sent out yesterday evening. It was a bit short notice, and I believe the last I heard, certainly nobody had interest. But if anyone wishes to express an interest, could they either do it now or immediately after the meeting to Ms Tompkins by email, and we'll take it from there. I think 8 for the workshop is probably a suitable sort of number, because that'll be in addition to some of the officers. So can I vote on the principle of setting up this workshop?
I think Karen was asking to come in.
Ms Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, yeah, apologies to Charter Trustees for the delay in the email going out, but just to confirm, I've had positive feedback from Councillor Marcus Andrews as one of our budget signatories, and also Councillor Julie Bagwell confirming that they're happy to be involved in the workshop. So just wanted to clarify that before you go to any further formal vote.
Right, thank you. I don't, and Councillor Trent can confirm that they're willing to be among the core 5, so to speak.
I've just confirmed it in the chat bar.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Neill?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, so can I now have a vote on the principle of setting up this workshop with that composition, the 5, so to speak, ex officio, plus about 3 others, the 3 others or 3 or 4 others to be confirmed afterwards. But on the principle, can you record in the conversation bar if you wish to abstain or vote against? Otherwise, I'll take it that you agree.
So, I think Councillor Broadhead has just requested to speak. Apologies, it's taking a while for the hands to come up on this device.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just a very brief one. This report was also considered by the Chartered Trustees of Bournemouth on Monday, and I think a point was raised there that it would be very good for those 2 workshops to interact with each other. Obviously, we've got 2 separate functions here, but it would be useful to not double on resources. So I'd strongly suggest that whoever is on those that workshop also liaises with the workshop that's been set up for the Bournemouth trustees as well. Thank you.
Are you actually suggesting joint meetings?
I'm not sure that the meeting on Monday went as far as to suggest a joint meeting, but just to make sure that it would just be good for them to touch base with each other, I'd suggest.
I certainly would not support totally joint. Yes. A certain amount of cooperation, yes, definitely.
So I think we have Karen coming in. I think Dan wants to come in. I was just going to.
Right. Okay. So Ms Tompkins first.
Madam Mayor, I may be stealing Mr Povey's thunder, just picking up the point that I know was made at Bournemouth, and also I think the point that Councillor Broadhead has just made. Obviously, I appreciate the need to sort of maybe interact, but obviously the 2 chartered trustees are separate entities. They're responsible for setting their own budget and priorities, and I'm sure as chartered trustees you appreciate that, but I just wanted to highlight that point. Obviously, there may well be a bit of overlap on membership anyway, so just to make that point, but apologies to Mr Povey if I've...
Yeah. Thank you. Can I just come in at this point and say that I think as time goes on, we may well find that the 2 groups of chartered trustees diverge on their activities and their priorities and their spending. So it would probably not be very sensible to completely work as one on this, or on anything for that matter, because we have our own identities after all. That's what we fought for, some of us. But yes, a certain amount of liaison, definitely. Mr Povey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just briefly, just to reiterate, I think doing separate meetings is probably sensible, although we'll be asking similar questions and similar themes of both charter trustees. There will be a certain amount of kind of technical slides that really portray the financial positions and the precepts of each separate charter trustee, and for that reason I think it would be smoother to do them independently. But what we could of course, or will of course do, is send the slides out to each charter trustees in advance, therefore allowing for plenty of discussion between the charter trustees before the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I would prefer this to be Poole charter trustees only. I believe we are an entity, and I think we need to look at this as Poole charter trustees. So I would prefer that we did it separately.
Thank you. Point noted. Clerk, I suppose. I'm trying to know what to call you. Trying to think what to call you in this context.
Yeah, just to say that I know that Councillor Jude's Butt has written about the scale of the reserves that the trustees will be left at the end, and that we can accommodate a review of what you want to do with those as part of that working group. So
yes. That was the intention. That was the intention. Yeah. I don't know whether anyone's done anything about voting, but now is the time, if you haven't already, if you vote against this proposal, can you record your comment now in the conversation bar? Otherwise, we'll take it that you agree and we'll go ahead with this working party.
I'm seeing no comments and no hands.
Right, fine. That seems to be unanimously accepted then. Thank you. I do remember we would like at least 3 people to put themselves forward to be on this group in addition to the people. So now we come on to the item 6, which has just been briefly touched on by Mr Povey already, the VAT position. So, Mr. Povey, over to you again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report really sets out the work that officers have done to get the Charter Trustee into a position where they can reclaim VAT. As I think I did mention earlier, HMRC have actually confirmed since we wrote the report that on the 14th of October, the statutory instrument listing the Charter Trustees was laid before Parliament, which means that from the 4th of November going forwards, the Charter Trustee will be able to reclaim VAT it incurs. It's likely that it will have incurred less VAT than the pro rata amount compared to last year because of the budget underspends, that we saw in the last item. But nevertheless, going forwards, we'll be able to reclaim VAT. What the report can't do or doesn't attempt to do is it can't change the position that we're in that for the last financial year we were unable to reclaim VAT, and up until the 4th of November the Charter Trustees won't be able to reclaim VAT because it's not retrospective. What the report hopefully does do is just demonstrate the route officers took to get the Charter Trustees registered to reclaim VAT, which is not a straightforward process. The route you take depends on the legislation that established the Charter Trustee, and not all Charter Trustees actually choose to go down this route anyway. And I think it's just illustrated by the fact that when we were referring queries to HMRC, they would refer them onto their policy team because it wasn't a well-trodden road that they could immediately get back to us on. I think hopefully the other thing that the report just brings out is that officers were establishing the Charter Trustees at the same time as BCP Council. It was quite a short time frame, and really the focus of officers was a safe and legal landing for all new authorities concerned. So in terms of the Charter Trustees, the focus was on setting a legal budget and precept and setting up things like the standing orders and the handbook, the constitutional documents of the Charter Trustee. The last thing that I will just draw to Charter Trustees' attention is the fact that I think why officers had wrongly assumed in the first instance that perhaps the Charter Trustee could reclaim VAT under the BCP Council banner was the complicated arrangements for actually raising the Charter Trustees' precepts in the first year. The legislation said basically that BCP Council would anticipate the amount the Charter Trustees need, and that amount would be scored against the BCP Council's council tax requirement and therefore referendum limits. So in all intents and purposes look like BCP funding, but we did clarify through the process that wasn't the case, and at that point is when we started liaising with HMRC to get the Charter Trustees registered under Section 33 of the Act. That's probably enough of the nitty-gritty, Madam Mayor, but I'll happily take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Povey. I think we're all very disappointed that we have actually missed out on reclaiming. We could, if we'd been correctly informed, have done, but that seems the second example this evening of misinformation coming down from civil servants, government, what have you, not necessarily locally, in fact not at all locally generated. So I'm afraid we are where we are, so now is not the time to keep regurgitating and going back over old happenings and old events. But if there are any questions, from now on to Mr. Povey, please put your hand up now.
Councillor Iyengar.
Councillor Iyengar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Povey. Thank you. Kind of what's done is done. From description, would it be fair to say that sort of what's happened is of a very one-off nature because of the creation of the BCP and because of the VAT change that you've described? Is it a one-off nature, or is there something, in a sense, a lesson learned because something like this may recur in the future, and we can kind of sort of, with that learning, be able to handle it, better than we were able to do before?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there's probably an element of both, to be honest. I think local government reorganisation was a learning curve in itself. There were people, officers, members members alike were doing things that they possibly had never done before, and perhaps never likely to do again in things like this. But certainly, you know, it was a one-off in the sense that we were juggling many priorities. As I said, the focus was on the safe and legal landing, but from now on, the charter trustee is registered under section 33 of the Act. That is a fact. So going forward, you know, we are able to back. So I think it's a bit of both. I think we have learned things going through, but I'm not sure whether this exact circumstance would ever be, you know, relayed again.
Thank you. Any other hands?
Can't say anything, Madam. No.
Okay, thank you. I suppose we need to formally accept this report. So again, as usual procedure, if you're not happy to accept the report, if you wish to vote against or abstain, can you put it in the conversation bar now? Otherwise, I will take it that you also accept the report.
No comments and
no comments. That's what I like to hear. Woo! Jumped one. So now we come on to item 7, the update on the development of the draft risk register. So in this case, I call on Karen Tompkins to introduce the item.
Many thanks, Madam Mayor. Just very brief introduction. Charter Trustees will recall from the last meeting in August the internal audit report, and one of the recommendations which was identified as a high objective and a high issue to determine the establishment of a risk register. The Charter Trustees at that point agreed to set up a working group for a small group of Charter Trustees to go away and start looking at the detail of the risk register. And indeed that working group has been set up, and the chairman of that working group is Councillor Marcus Andrews. We've had a couple of meetings and obviously we are going through the various risks at the moment. I don't know whether Madam Mayor, Councillor Marcus Andrews would like to make some comments as the chairman of that working group, but it was just an opportunity to report back to say that that work has started, and ultimately when the register is finalised we will be circulating that out to all Charter Trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tompkins. Wish to add anything?
Yeah, very briefly, we've had 2 meetings of the working party. There's a team of several members. We've gone through the first draft, debated it and agreed amendments. A second draft's come back to us, and again we've gone through it and fine-tuned it. Obviously the risk register deals with various items, the civic regalia and the safety of the mayor. It's not a finished document yet. It's nearly coming to a conclusion. So following another meeting, we hope to bring it back to the next meeting of the Charter Trustees for formal adoption. So as I say, it's work in progress, but we're nearly there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any questions, comments? Please raise your hand now.
Nothing coming through, Madam.
Nothing. Okay. So again, I suppose we should formally accept this report, this update. So again, same thing, note in the conversation bar if you wish to abstain or vote against by writing the words abstain or against. Otherwise, I will assume everyone's in favour of accepting what's in this item as a work in progress.
Nothing's gone through, Madam. No.
Nothing, great. So, on to item 8, which is talking about the accommodation for the Charter Trustee, and this is a verbal report from the clerk, or probably wearing his chief executive hat.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just a verbal update to Charter Trustees. You will know that the Cabinet of BCP Council have taken a decision to focus the activities of BCP Council on the Bournemouth Civic, to move most of the head office operations to there. That ends up becoming, or will become, surplus to requirements at some point. What we have been looking at are a number of options, and we're looking at options, for example, potentially including the coroner's surgery to move to Poole Civic Centre. I have to say, not all of the options, we're looking at maintaining a mayoral facility within the civic centre. So we are clearly keeping that at the heart of the priorities about potential use of the Poole Civic Centre. I will undertake to update Charter Trustees should that not become possible for any reason at the earliest possible opportunity, but at the moment that's certainly central to our plans. Our sense is that the Mayor's Parlour is critical to the operation of trustees, and we'll maintain that if at all possible. I think members, Charter Trustees, will know that part of the Civic Centre is listed, and therefore we need to be very careful with our future use of that part of the building in particular. So we are taking that into account. I'm optimistic that we'll find an accommodation that works for the Charter Trustees and for the Mayor. As I say, I'll undertake to let you know as soon as possible if that should not be the case in the developments.
Thank you very much. I know this is very important, not just to me as the current mayor, but to former mayors and people who may well in the future be mayors, and people who are Poole residents and keen on the heritage and history of Poole, that the heritage assets, particularly the council chamber and the mosaics and the Mayor's Parlour, should be retained in much their current format and current use, obviously expanded use, because they can't just sit idle for days and weeks on end as the only being used by us as Charter Trustees. But I hope that the optimism to retain those elements of this building will be proved justified. I should be very disappointed if they're not.
We have a request to speak from Councillor Daniel Butt and Councillor Tony Trent.
Okay, Councillor Daniel Butt, could you, your turn to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Yeah, it's just go back to Graham's sort of response there. Regards to the offices that we have at Civic Centre, will they still be accessible for members to use in future use? Obviously, when COVID comes into better conditions and we can actually meet, and will there be availability for space to use? But also obviously Madam Mayor's parlour and everything else, the regalia, will that be kept there for future onwards? Will it become a permanent thing? It won't change in the near future.
I think about it. I think my honest answer is I think we just have to see as the projects develop and as the opportunities develop. So we're looking to move all of the customer contact to be part of the Poole Library service in the Dolphin Centre, and that will give us a much more comprehensive forward-facing or customer-facing service. We're looking to do the same in Bournemouth as well, and the same in Christchurch. So I think I wouldn't want to make a commitment on that, but clearly we will talk to members, and ultimately it will be members' decisions in terms of the future use of the building. So I've got no doubt that will be at the heart of our conversations, but I wouldn't want to make a commitment either way.
Thank you. And Councillor Trent. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm relieved to hear that the civic buildings would be part of a plan, or hopefully be part of a plan, and would suggest that if the old council chamber, the civic, the conference room below, and just everything basically in front of the doors on both floors, because you basically go through doors to the office accommodation. If that were kept in public ownership, I would be greatly relieved. What I wouldn't want to happen is that somehow there's an arrangement that's come to where we end up as tenants in the building or anything like that. I really think we need to protect at least that frontage. Obviously, we can't really justify what happens to the rest of the building, because it certainly is beyond what the Charter Trustees need. But I think we need to keep the important parts of the building. They are accessible. They would be excellent facilities for community groups and public groups. So I'm really hoping that is foremost in our thinking as a obviously from BCP's council point of view to at least protect what has history and value to it.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. And Councillor Mellor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I thought it might be useful just to comment on both Councillor Butt and Trent's comments. I agree with Councillor Trent in terms of maintaining the at least the central building under our ownership. So hopefully that's something we should be able to achieve. We have a cabinet paper coming to cabinet shortly, where there's talk of a civic working party primarily around the Bourne site. I see no reason why effectively that shouldn't also include a discussion around what the civic needs are in Poole. My firm commitment is that at the very least the mayoral process and heritage should be maintained at that site, as Graham Fountain said, reference the retention of the parlour and that main central building. So hopefully that's of some use. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Howells.
Thank you. Yeah, I am concerned about the movement of facilities into Poole Library. Obviously, the library is a certain size and it only has, I think, a couple of small conference style rooms in the back. It seems that this may be, by definition, a reduction in the size of the library service and maybe a consolidation of library services into Bournemouth. I mean, I know that this is partly a council issue, but I wouldn't want us as charter trustees to be part of a process which was undermining the library service in Poole.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sure we all appreciate your comments, but which we as charter trustees have absolutely no influence as charter trustees, as that's a different matter. And I'm sure people will be making comments and entering into discussion when the time is right and when the discussion. But that is something over which we, as I say, as charter trustees, have no influence at all, unfortunately.
Well, I think we have some influence as to where we go for future meetings, don't we?
But that's nothing to do with transferring things to the library, say.
Councillor Iyengar and then Councillor Butler.
Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually wanted to say something in response to Councillor Hull, but I know it's on the periphery of our Charter Trustees discussion, so I'll keep it very brief if I may. I totally accept Councillor Hull's concern. Actually, such as it happens earlier on today, I was in Poole Library meeting with the library manager, Mehdi Bernard, and her staff, and there's quite a few rooms there. They, if I may speak for Mehdi, are supportive of directionally what's going on, and the library service will not be compromised unless anything untoward happens. And as portfolio holder covering libraries, I will be the champion for making sure that our library service is not just protected but enhanced through all of this, which I genuinely think it will. But I fully acknowledge your concern, and it needs monitoring carefully throughout the transition. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just to emphasise that our main reason for being charter trustees is to uphold the traditions and the heritage and the history of Poole. Now, surely the Civic Centre building is, in fact, as a whole building, it's actually an iconic status of that purpose, and I really hope that councillors who haven't been involved in the preamble of what's going to happen to the Civic Centre, I really hope that from now on we will be included as a whole group, and the public as well, to actually say what we want the Civic Centre to be in the future, and hopefully it will include community services and an income generation, as well as mayoral hosting and ceremonies. So hopefully that will happen.
Thank you. Any more
I think so, Madam Anna. Nothing. Got nothing else showing.
Okay, so
Yes, it's me. Excuse me, I do have my hand up.
Yeah, so I've got Councillor Howell again.
all right, Councillor Howell. Yeah. There's a time lag between you actually putting your hand up and it registering here, so I apologise for that.
Okay, thank you. I suggest, following on from Councillor Butler's point, is the most obvious place to hold the Charter Trustees meeting is in the Guild Hall. You know, we use it for weddings in the daytime, but it should be free in the evenings, and that would be much more sensible than being locked away in the back of a library somewhere.
Can I come in? Graham will, if I'm totally wrong on this, but from what he said, that isn't the suggestion at all. The suggestion is that the intention, the hope is that the council chamber will still be available. Therefore, we can continue to meet in the old former council chamber, because it's probably the most prestigious and heritage-rich section of this building there is. So
yes, I'm totally supportive of maintaining that facility, but I mean, I'm getting the impression that we will be moved out of it for a period during a whatever redevelopment happens of the wider building, and if that was the case, then the Guildhall would be an appropriate building, I think.
Oh, certainly as a temporary measure, but I don't get the impression that the expectation is that that would be a permanent.
I'm just worried, Madam Mayor, that the conversation. I thought so. We absolutely need to engage with members. I think, as Councillor Mellor said, we need to engage with members and let's have that discussion.
But that's not for now. Now is is just an update.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I think really, and the point I was going to make, because I'd actually posted the point, was that the obvious place for us to meet will, as long as we can, be the council chamber at Poole Civic, and there's the room below which has potential, I think, as public space, the conference suite, or the the ceremonial room, and then you've just basically got the suite at the front, the mayor's chamber, two of the group rooms, and what used to be the chief executive's, not the chief executive's, the leader's office at one point. They all sit together, and effectively I think most of what we would need to do could be done from there, and maybe from whatever's adjacent to the entrance on the ground floor and the stairwell. And I really think that we should be very clear that that is how Charter Trustees see the future. With regard to Councillor Butler's point, unless Poole Civic Centre was used as offices, which obviously they aren't, then there would be the necessity for the rest of the building to be repurposed. But I don't see that as necessarily meaning that we couldn't continue to use the bits that have the history to them.
Absolutely, and everything I'm hearing from what the chief executive has said today and on previous occasions, the intention is, after all, the front bit of it, the bit that most of us would call the heritage part, is listed. So that does make things more likely that they will be kept in much the state condition or form that they are now, and can be used where appropriate as they are now, with wider use in addition. So I think it's unlikely, and I think it's unnecessary at this stage to be looking at alternatives to using the council chamber and the mayor's parlour, for instance, because the intention, as I understand it, is not a condition or circumstance that is expected to arise or intended to arise. Okay, I've got the clerk or chief exec nodding beside me, so I've obviously summed things up pretty accurately, which is
And no further hands or comments.
Thank you very much. So we'll put that to bed. We don't need to vote on anything. This was just an update, a verbal update. So we move on to item 9, the roles and responsibilities for the budget signatory. Taken on the role several months ago, but were in a slight what they were actually meant to be doing. So Karen Tompkins now is going to present a paper on the proposed roles and responsibilities of said budget signatories.
Many thanks, Madam Mayor. Circulated with your agenda is a very brief job description, for want of a better phrase, which sets out the key functions of the budget signatories. It's obviously before the Charter Trustees today to consider, comment on, amend as they feel is appropriate. Once we've got an agreed set of roles and responsibilities, then we can include those within the Charter Trustees handbook and standard orders. Just to reflect that this again was a recommendation that came out as part of the internal audit report. So you can see that we're demonstrating that we're going through all of those requirements and addressing those recommendations as appropriate. Happy to respond to any questions, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Charter Trustees wishing to ask or comment?
Nothing that I can see so far, Madam Mayor. No.
No. Okay. I don't think.
Sorry, Councillor Marcus Andrews.
Councillor Andrews, who of course is a budget signatory.
Yeah, it's just an observation. I was at the Twinning Association AGM yesterday evening, and they were talking about the fact that obviously people don't do checks now, sign checks, and obviously we're called budget signatories. So obviously in this electronic world that we're moving into, plastic, no cash, no checks or whatever, you know, we may have to be given a different job description. That's the only observation I need to make. Thank you.
I am second of 3 potential signatories on an online account, and I have to, as well as the treasurer, I'm often called on to be a second authoriser. So maybe budget authoriser will be the term. I don't know, but you know, it's effectively what would have been called a signatory in the old days. So the role still exists in a different format.
I'm sure we will undertake to identify the correct bureaucratic term and make sure that we use it appropriately.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think this is something that we need to vote on or even accept because
Councillor Trent just put his hand up.
All right, Councillor Trent wants to make a comment or ask a question.
Yeah, I think that being signatories in public bodies is of quite high importance. I'm a trustee of a couple of charities, and we have to use checks regularly and have people sign checks, because that actually means that you can track back for payments and otherwise. And so in some ways the Charter Trustees can't be that different to a charity trustee. We have a sort of charitable aim, and I would have thought that some of the sort of guidelines for charities would also apply to the Charter Trustees. So, you know, I'm thinking that we probably do need to have budget signatories and a process by which people sign things off and someone countersigns it. But you know, I could be corrected.
I think that again is something for the future as we work through, but the role and responsibilities will remain the same, whether it's actually physically signing a piece of paper or some other way of authorising or agreeing to an expenditure.
I've got both Dan Povey and Karen.
Right. So Mr. Povey and then Mr. Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's a good point. Just on, because for largely for reasons of efficiency, that the Charter Trustees piggyback onto the financial systems that BCP Council has got established, and so very much if something is within an approved budget, so the Charter Trustees will approve their detailed budget headings in the financial year. There's a mechanism in place where one of the officers working for the Chartees Charter Trustees will raise an order. That will be certified by someone authorised an officer authorised to authorise that expenditure in accordance with the budget, and that will go through BCP Council's payment procedures, which is basically automated, very few checks, normally a backs payment. The current role of the budget signatories is for them items of expenditure that aren't necessarily in line with the approved Charter Trustees budget, and a decision might need to be made whether that expenditure gets approved or not. Now, going forward, there's certainly a question whether the Charter Trustees want to, have their own bank account, so on and so forth. Because again, at the moment, they use the BCP Council's bank account. Their transactions are totally kept discreet in a certain place, but they're part of the overall control environment of BCP Council. And that's both very secure and good internal control and very cost effective, as you can tell from the recharges you get from accountancy. At the moment, they're £500. Now, I'd probably suggest as part of the budget process, that's a little on the low side, but you can see the value for money and the financial control you're getting going forward. And what we need to put in the new financial regs when they get approved is what is our direction of travel and where do the Charter Trustees want to go with that.
Thank you. And Ms Tompkins, and that I think will be the last comment on this.
Just to follow on from what Mr Povey said, obviously part of our role will be to make sure, even though it might at the moment not be those physical signatures, but having the various templates and audit process in place. So if anybody wanted to come back to check whether there was any approval given by the budget signatories, we can demonstrate that those appropriate arrangements for transparency purposes are available. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I don't think there's anyone else wishing to speak on this, so that wraps it up. That was the last item on the agenda. So I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.